Jesus has something to say to His church. That's our series. Jesus has something to say to His church. And we start off with Revelation 1. You'll see that John was on the island called Patmos. He's there because of the Word of God and for the testimony of Christ. He himself is experiencing persecution. He is there on the Lord's day, and it says he heard behind him a loud voice as a trumpet saying, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. And what you see, write in a book, send it to the 7 churches which are in Asia. I didn't put those 7 churches there, but you know which ones we're talking about. We'll see them in a moment. Then I turned to see the voice that spoke with me, and having turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands. In the midst of the 7 lampstands, one like the Son of Man, and that is Jesus Himself. And the reason I focus on this is because I just want to remind you that when we look at the 7 golden lampstands, He gives us what they are. He says, the mystery of the 7 stars, which you saw in my right hand, and the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches. Holding in His hand are the pastors. He keeps the pastors in His hands. And then He says, the 7 lampstands, which you saw, are the 7 churches. So we have a picture here of Jesus coming into the midst of His 7 churches. And someone gave a rendition of that looks like this, where we see Jesus in that picture of Jesus with the glory, the sword coming from His mouth, the robe there, the sash. We saw that in the first sermon. And He's walking in the midst of all these churches. And as He walks in the midst, there's a question that we should ask. Why is Jesus walking in the midst of His churches? And I give 3 things here this morning. First, to evaluate. Second, to encourage. And thirdly, to edify. As He's walking in the midst of His church, He's evaluating. He's examining. Is this church doing what I want it to do? He's also encouraging, because church needs encouragement. We're in a spiritual battle. This is tough. So He comes to encourage, but also to edify, because He wants to build up His church. That's the word edify, to build up. He is building His church. So He's going to come in, He's going to look, what does this church need? Ultimately, I can break it down to even more 2 words. When you think about why Jesus is walking in His church, He's walking in His church to protect the light. Again, remember, He's building His church. The gates of hell will not prevail against it, but that doesn't mean the gates of hell are not fighting against it. So He's got to protect the light. And when you have a candle burning, it can be blown out. So He's going to walk in to protect it. And when we look at these stories, these letters, we're seeing Jesus saying things that is to help Christians be stronger against the evil one, but also to purify the light. To purify the light. When you think about a lampstand, unlike these lights, like a lampstand, you know that a candle can get dross on it. This candle is an example of that picture right there. That's got the dross on it. When it gets lit, that's got all the light you're going to get. But if we were to cut this off, if I were to pull this off, clean this off, you'll get a much brighter burning light. Jesus is walking into the midst of His churches, looking to see where the dross is, looking to see what is keeping the light from shining the brightest. So He begins to point those things out. There's 2 things that will keep the light from burning bright. One would be our doctrine. The other will be our behavior. So as we go through the 7 letters, He's going to be bringing out things that says, okay, I'm seeing something going on with doctrine, and it's causing your light not to shine bright. I'm seeing something with your behavior. Last week, Ephesus, he saw something with their behavior. They're over here, there were 7 things they were doing that were phenomenal. But one thing overshadowed the whole 7 of which they were doing, and he said, here's why: you've lost your first love. He brought out their behavior was causing their light to go out. So Jesus is walking in this church, and as He walks in His church, He says, I want to protect my church, but I'm also seeking to purify my church. Now, today, Jesus says something to say to his church at Smyrna. And we call this church the persecuted church. Now let that word hit you. Let that word sink in. We have to pause. Because when I say the persecuted church, you and I are not able to totally identify with that word. You and I are living in a country that affords us religious freedom. Today we have persecution in America. No, we don't. Today we have in the United States people who are seeking to do away with some of our religious liberties. But we can't even come close, folks, to talking about persecution. When we talk about persecution like this, we're talking about a church of the catacombs. That means they're living in hiding. They've built places of worship that's back in the caves. We're talking about the church of the martyrs. We're talking about the people who have died. So this morning, as we start talking about the church at Smyrna, I want you to have this mindset. You're at Arlington Cemetery. And you've gone to the tomb of the unknown soldier. And when you walk there, and when you're standing there, you're not texting, and you're not talking, you're not even whispering. You're giving total reverence and respect because you're realizing that that tomb represents thousands, maybe millions of people who've given their lives for freedom through the years. But this particular soldiers of America that we never even were able to identify their names, who they are. And so we know we're at a place that has to have great reverence. Well, this morning, we're going to look at a church in which people are not losing their religious liberties. They're losing their lives. When you think about the church, I try not to be too graphic, but that's the Colosseum. That's lions that were set loose to devour a Christian. Because in that early century, Nero and then the emperors after him threw the Christians to the lions. We can tell stories today of how they were tortured. We talk about persecution. We don't know it. Matter of fact, our thought is that's back then, right? But I do remind you folks, these are the images of 2015. And today, the church of Jesus Christ is under more persecution than any time in the history of the church. More people are in jail. More people are dying because they said, I am a Christian, than at any time in the history of the church. This morning, we come here in a place of tremendous freedom. No fears, hardly. But you know, if you go to some churches, they're immediately reminded when they walk in. This is a faith that could cost me my life. The martyrs were bored. The martyrs. Many of us grew up in churches where when you would walk in, maybe on this side over here, there would be a board for the Sunday school attendance, the worship attendance, and the giving. Well, I walked in churches in India, and they didn't have those kind of boards. That's what they had. They had boards dedicated to people who had died for Christ. This morning we come to talk about a church that is persecuted, and that is our history. From the very beginning, we're looking at a picture here of Stephen being stoned to death. One of the first disciples. We're just getting started. This is Acts chapter 8. We're just getting started. And there was severe persecution that broke out against the church in Jerusalem. Severe persecution. Who's leading this is a man by the name of Saul. Saul, however, was ravaging the church. We know that name to be Paul. To destroy the church. And here's how it's described. He would enter into house after house, dragging off men and women and put them in prison. This is the history of the beginning of the church. It continues on. Not something to read before you go to bed, because it is graphic and it's gruesome. Fox's Book of Martyrs. And it tells the story of Stephen and the other disciples, and all the way up into when we get into Reformation, where over and over people who stood for truth were killed. You and I have, for the most part, a Baptist background. The Anabaptists were really our forefathers coming out of the Reformation. You know, there are hardly any theologians from the Anabaptist era. There's John Calvin, there's Martin Luther, but we're the theologians for the Baptist. There are hardly any, because as soon as they took a stand that the Word of God is what we will follow and only the Word of God, they were killed. Most great early Anabaptist leaders were put to death because they believed in the Word of God. Sola fide, faith alone. Sola scriptura, Scripture alone. And that cost them their lives. Fox's Book of Martyrs. We are a church that has got a trail of blood. So this morning we come to talk about a church that is persecuted. A church that is persecuted. And Jesus has something to say to this church. And He's going to give, and I'm going to let you know right up front, He's going to give words of encouragement to this church. He's going to give hope, eternal hope. And He is going to give a word, stay faithful. Stay faithful. So let's look at what He has to say to the church of Smyrna. He says, and the angel of the church in Smyrna write, these things says, the first and the last, who was dead and came to life. I know your works, tribulation, and poverty, but you are rich. And I know the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not fear any of those things which you are about to suffer. Indeed, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested. You will have tribulation 10 days. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And he who overcomes shall not be hurt by the second death. This is the shortest of the letters, only 4 verses and 115 words. I call it the Gettysburg Address of the 7 letters. It is short, but it is oh so powerful. It is short because Jesus has no concern with this church. He has no complaint. He doesn't have to make any correction with this church. You know, as we think about our outline, there's going to be a commendation, and then there's going to be His concern. And then comes with the concern His correction. And with the correction will come the consequences. But not with this church. When Jesus walks in the midst of this church and He sees the persecution that's going on, the only thing He is going to do is speak words of encouragement. He is going to commend them. I will say this, what this letter has as an overall thing is understanding. It has understanding. Look at verse 9 again. I know your works. I know the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not. He knows. I just want you to imagine this morning, you're in Smyrna. It's about 100 AD. You have been under intense persecution, and it's Sunday morning, and it's time to go to church. You head over to somebody's house, and when you get to the house, they hand you back to the back room. You get in the back room, and there you sit down, and someone says, "You're not going to believe this, but we have a letter. You know John's over in Pappas? Well, we have a messenger here." They bring the messenger out and says, "Listen, he's got a letter." And they begin to read the letter. And the first thing you hear him say is, "I know." I mean, you've heard him say the description, but all of a sudden you hear, "I know. I know your tribulation. I know what you're going through." And then you hear, "I know the blasphemy." He not only knows what you're going through, he knows who's causing it. This tells you again that he is so involved in his church. He knows exactly what is taking place. He knows what's going on with him. And I want you to know this morning, he knows what's going on with you. He knows everything you're facing. He knows the struggles you're having. He knows the pressure you're under. And he knows if you're facing this from somebody, he's keeping the record of them also. He knows what you're dealing with. He understands. Well, when we look at these letters, we have to look at the city, because there's a lot from the city that goes to why the church is facing what it's facing. In this case, the name Smyrna comes from the word myrrh. Now, you've heard that word. We know it's a Christmas word. We talk about the wise men bringing gifts to Jesus: frankincense, gold, and myrrh. Well, the myrrh is a perfume, and it's a perfume that comes from pressed gum. So they go to a tree. If you think about how you get maple syrup, you gotta drill into the tree. The syrup begins to come out. Well, this will come out as a gum, and they have to press it down. And as they press it down, as they press that gum down, it squeezes out a juice that becomes a perfume. It's a perfume. This perfume can be used as a medicine. You remember when Jesus was crucified? It says they gave him wine mixed with myrrh. It's like a drug. It's to ease the pain. So this can be used to ease pain, but it's also used to anoint the body of one that has died in perfume. Because, again, we dress death up. In those days, when a person died, they began to decay, and immediately it began to stink, and so they put this perfume on, so they could handle the body until they got it put in the ground or wherever they would put the body. Well, here, this word myrrh is associated with that which is pressed. The word for tribulation is the word for pressed. And it also has to deal with pain. And what are these people facing? They're facing a lot of persecution, pain, and death. So the word for Smyrna fits its name, its description. It is a place that people are being pressed. It's a place where people are in pain. It's a place where people are facing death. Now, when you come to the city itself, Smyrna is in a battle to be the greatest city in Asia Minor. Last week we talked about Ephesus and how it was second only to Rome. Well, Smyrna is fighting for that position. When you look at a map, you'll see that Smyrna is just about 40 miles northwest there of Ephesus. It's located also on the Aegean Sea. It's going to be a city that has a lot going for it. We would note this for you. It's an old city. Some people have said that you will be able to say Smyrna was founded like 3000 BC. So it's a rebuilt city, because it's going to collapse, it's going to have earthquakes, and every time they rebuild it, they try to make it better. When the Greeks come along, Alexander the Great comes through there, he looks at this city and says, "You know what I want you to do? I want you to make this city a model for others in the Greek culture." So anybody wants to say, what does it take to be like a Greek, the best of the best? Look at Smyrna. So they're going to do all kinds of decorations. They want to make this a beautiful city. It's a city with a deep harbor, lots of commerce. It has a golden street. They literally took the main street and they paved it with gold. And you got to think of it there for a moment. Here's the people who are facing persecution, who are dying, who not only are going to get this letter now, they're going to get this whole book of Revelation. What do you think it meant to them when they got to the end and read about us walking on streets of gold? So here's a city with golden streets. It's lined with temples. And it has a 20,000-seat arena with a gymnasium. They're into Greek culture, so they're into Greek athletics. Incredible city. We call this one of the most beautiful cities in Asia Minor. Absolutely gorgeous. With this is now a Roman city. When we get to the time when this letter is being written, it's a Roman city, and it's a free city because every time there was a battle, Smyrna was on the side of the Romans. There was a time when they were fighting battle, they didn't have winter clothes. The people from Smyrna took their clothes out there and gave them to the Romans. So the Romans rewarded them. They rewarded them by being a judicial center. And Smyrna loved Rome. Smyrna loved Rome. Now, if you don't understand that statement, you're not going to understand what I'm teaching today. You've got to understand that statement. It loved Rome. It loved Rome. It absolutely thought Rome was the greatest city of all, and it worshipped it. In 196 BC, they built a temple called the Dea Roma. It's a temple to the goddess of Rome. But little by little, their affection for a place changed to the affection for a person. They loved Rome, but now, to really show their devotion to Rome, they love Caesar. And what happens in Smyrna, Smyrna becomes the center for Caesar worship. They're so into Rome, they now say, we are totally devoted to Caesar. And they create this cult of worshiping Caesar. I'll come back to that in just a moment on how that's going to affect. So now we've seen the city. What's going on with the church? Well, Jesus says you're facing three things. And here are the three things they are facing. Number one, you're facing pressure to compromise. The word tribulation there, this is not the Great Tribulation. The word tribulation literally means one who is under pressure. You're under incredible pressure. People are putting all kind of pressure on you. And they're being pressured to compromise. What kind of compromise were they being asked to make? Well, once a year, they were being asked, no. Once a year, they were being required to come to the temple, that Dea Roma, and there they were to offer a pinch of incense. And then they were to say, Caesar's Lord. And when they said Caesar's Lord, someone would hear them, they would record it, and then they would write out a certificate and hand it to them. This morning, think about what that does to your Christianity. If today you were asked to say somebody else is Lord other than Jesus Christ, how can I illustrate how this played out? Well, we live in Columbus, Ohio. And Columbus, Ohio is the home of the, say it guys, Buckeyes. And we love the Buckeyes. So just imagine, to really demonstrate to Ohio State that we absolutely love the Buckeyes, the mayor decides to pass an ordinance. And the ordinance is, once a year, every person in the Columbus metro area, that would include us up here in Lewis Center, once a year, and we don't care if you have other teams, we don't care if you like other teams, but once a year, you have to wear an Ohio State shirt for the whole day. What do you think about that, Nick?
That's a great idea.
Jim? Liking that idea? Right? Michael, you kind of like the Georgia Bulldogs. But could you wear that Ohio State shirt just for one day? Just for one day.
Come on, man.
No? Okay. I like Virginia Tech, but Jim, I could do it. I could compromise. I could wear it. And I'd be, whatever. But what about Clayton.
I'd be dead.
We haven't rehearsed this, Jim. He just said he'd be dead. Now imagine the mayor of Columbus going from the level of fan appreciation, we support you Buckeyes, to, you know what? You're going to live in Columbus, you will support the Buckeyes. And if you don't wear that shirt and show it to somebody at Ohio State that you're wearing the shirt and get a certificate, you can't get a job in Columbus. And the only way you can get a job, you show up in any place, the first thing they're going to ask is, where's your certificate that shows that you are a fan, you have worn your Buckeye shirt? What if they take it to the level of, yes, we're going to expel you from this city? What if they take it to the level we're going to execute you? That's what happened in Smyrna. It sounded like a good idea to let Caesar know we support him. It moved to the level that if you did not say Caesar is Lord, you lost your job, you could have your home taken from you, to the point that you were executed. And in 155, one of the greatest Christian martyrs of all time, Polycarp, he was simply asked, once a year, come in here, Polycarp, just come in, offer the incense, do it, just make them happy. Just do it. He said, I can't do it. Jesus is Lord. And they took him and they executed him because he would not say Caesar is Lord. That's the extent that this church is facing pressure. And because they're facing this kind of pressure, Jesus says, you're also facing poverty. You're facing poverty because what happens is there's not just physical persecution, folks, that we face. It is economic persecution. And people can, because you say you're a Christian, immediately be excluded from the club. And this church is being excluded. So they're facing poverty. And they're also facing slander. These Jews who live in Smyrna, who are doing well, they're good friends with the Romans, and they go, yeah, you know what? Hey, there's a Christian right there. And they have not said Caesar is Lord. And so they slandered the Christians. Jesus takes an opportunity, by the way, to remind us that you may say you're a Jew on the outside, that doesn't mean squat. You got to be one on the inside. And he calls these Jews who are persecuting Christians the synagogue of Satan. Earlier he had said in John, he said, you Jews, you think you're doing your Father's will? The one in heaven? No, you're doing your Father's will, your Father who is Satan. Because you are not worshiping the true God. And now there's a synagogue of Satan here in this city because there's Jews there who are not worshiping the true God, and they're persecuting Christians. Think about this for a moment. These Christians living in Smyrna, with this kind of pressure, with this kind of poverty, with people slandering them, how are they living day in and day out? What's the first word that comes to your mind if you were living there? Every day is going to be a day of what for you? It's going to be a day of fear. I mean, all we have to do is just imagine for a second what it was like 75 years ago in Germany if you were a Jew. I wonder if I'm going to be found out today. I wonder if my neighbor's going to turn me in today. I wonder if I'm going to be executed today. I wonder if everything I've got can be taken from me today. That's how this church is living. When Jesus walks in the midst of Smyrna, where the persecution is the greatest, he sees a church that is giving its very life for him. So Jesus has something to say. And he has 8 statements, 8 words of encouragement. He wants this church to know that he knows what's going on. And he wants to strengthen them as they deal with a world that is attacking them. How does he give words of encouragement? First off, with his description. When you look at that description there in Revelation 2, it says that it reveals his power over his enemies and power over our enemies. Look at it. His description. These things says the first and the last who was dead and came to life. Now, we'll read that quickly, but don't read that quickly. Look at that statement. Jesus is revealing himself to this church, and here's what he's saying: I am eternal. First and last. You know, when we say Jesus is eternal, how do we describe it? Well, in human terms, we can't. So he goes, I'm the first, I'm the last. That doesn't mean he has a beginning, doesn't mean he has an ending. It just simply means that the best I can comprehend in my mind is there has to be something that begins and ends. But he says, I never end. I never end. And guess what's going to happen to that emperor in Rome right now that's being worshipped, Domitian? He's going to end. He's not going to live forever, but I'll live forever. And then when it comes to this whole thing about you dying, hey, I've been there, but guess what I did? I was resurrected. I conquered death. I conquered the devil. And you need to know I will help you conquer it also, because I am the resurrection and the life. That's a description of victory, folks. He's letting people know who are being defeated. I mean, if you think about being persecuted, you think you're defeated. If you're thinking about having your head chopped off, you feel like you have been defeated. Jesus said, you're not defeated. I'm not defeated. This is a statement of victory. And I want you to know, when you follow Jesus Christ, you always come out a winner. Because he has conquered Satan. He has conquered death. So he's encouraging them. We're going to win in the end. He encourages them with his recognition of their condition. And I've already mentioned this. He knows. The fact that Jesus knows what they're going through ought to encourage every one of us. Thirdly, he encourages them with his estimation of their condition. You know what it said there in verse 9? He says, I know your works, tribulation, and poverty. But he quickly, hold on. You got to be sitting there thinking, if we're going through all this, we got to be the poorest church around. He goes, you're not the poorest church around, you're the richest church around. You have a love for me. You have a dependence for me. You're the richest church of the 7 churches. Matter of fact, we'll get a comparison later on. Church of Laodicea. Here's Smyrna, a poor little church that was really rich. Laodicea is a rich, large church that was really poor. Now, what church do you want to be a part of? I don't want to be a church that everybody looks and says, you guys got it made. Or you want to be a part of a church that's saying, I can't move without Jesus. I can't do anything with Jesus. I got to have Jesus all the time. I need him. I'm telling you, folks, spiritual maturity is I need him more. This church is rich because it needs him. That's his estimation. Can you imagine again, they're reading everything. He's got to be looking at us going, we're the worst church ever. He goes, no, you're my best church. You're the rich church. And then he gives his inspiration to them. Fear not. Fear not. Now, they are facing intense persecution. Fear not when you're getting ready to suffer. Don't be afraid when you're getting ready to suffer. Someone has done a study, and through the different phrases, it's not just fear not, but don't be afraid, all that. They said there are 365 fear nots, do not be afraid in your Bible. One for every day. Because every day we get up with an enemy that wants to destroy us, and Jesus says, don't fear him. Do not fear him. Do not fear what you're getting ready to face. Matter of fact, he taught this with his disciples early on. As they were getting ready to go out, Matthew chapter 10, he sends them out, he says, by the way, fear not those who kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Side note, Polycarp, when they were getting ready to kill him, the man says, I'm going to burn you with fire. He said, yeah, you're going to burn me with fire, but then you're going to burn in hell. You're going to burn with an everlasting fire. He says, you better think about what you're doing right now. You're going to burn me with fire, but you will be burning with an everlasting fire. That's who we need to fear. The fact that one day if we're not right with God, we burn with an everlasting fire. He encourages them, number 5, with a prophetic revelation. A prophetic revelation. When I come to Revelation 2:10, he says, do not fear any of those things which you are about to suffer. Indeed, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison that you may be tested and will have tribulation 10 days. Now, you're going to say, I'm not really sure I'm seeing the encouragement here. I understand. But there is something to notice, right? 10 days. There's going to be intense persecution. He's given a painful prediction, but watch this, that comes with a limitation. And if we had the time this morning, we would jump into the book of Job. Because while Satan is going to be given the freedom to persecute this church, he has a set limitation. There's only so much he can do. Now, I got to be honest. As I start reading this, and I'm reading about their tribulation and their poverty and what the Jews are doing to them, I want the next statement to be intervention. I want to read Jesus as saying, I'm coming to your rescue, church. I'm going to, listen. You became a Christian for all the health and the wealth you could receive, right? So I want to come in and make sure that everything goes wonderful for you. I know you heard God has a wonderful plan for your life. So I'm going to come in and make sure you don't have any pains, and that you don't have any tribulation, and that you don't face any torment. I mean, that's how I've been taught in American Christianity. We're not supposed to have any of these bad things going on. Where's the intervention here? Jesus is not intervening here. But he is setting limitations here. And here's what happens. He makes a statement in there. Did you see it? That you may be tested. That you may be tested. And here's what I want you to know today. Test, reveal, truth. Test, reveal, truth. For us to know who the real Christians are, they have to go through tests. They have to go through trials. When they go through, all of a sudden, the real Christian shows up. Do you know why the church of Laodicea is not facing any persecution? Because they are so much like the world has no reason not to like them. And most of them are not saved. The world and the church are so blended together. Why is there not going to be persecution? But when there's persecution, all of a sudden the test begins to reveal, oh, that one's real. Because you don't die for something you don't believe in. And these people are dying for what they believe in. And what happens with the test, it reveals something to God. It also reveals something to you. But here's the most important thing, that I think the reason God allows many Christians to go through tests, trials, tribulations, is to reveal something to the devil. Because again, we need a whole study on Job here. When Job was going through that testing, why was he going through the testing? God says, hey Satan, would you look at Job? That guy loves me for who I am. Satan says, that's a lie. We'll take everything he's got. You watch him. He will love me because of who I am. He wants to put Job on a pedestal to be a showcase to the devil that the devil is a liar. And many times we will go through trials and tribulation because Satan needs to be shown that we are truly committed to the Lord. And Smyrna is going to show they are totally committed to it. They're not going to compromise. They're not going to become corrupt like these other churches we're going to see in the next couple of weeks. They are steadfast on the Word. And from Smyrna, there's going to be this group of Christians all the way through the Dark Ages. There'll always be true Christians. They'll be the ones who are persecuted, but they're always going to be there. The real ones will always shine. They will stand firm. What does that picture do for us? You see something there today that causes you to say, you know what? I think they're real. Somebody said, are you a Christian? Let's go. The real ones rise to the top. The test proved the truth. Testing reveals truth. He encourages them also this morning with his powerful instruction, be faithful unto death. Now some people can look at that statement and say, hold on, that's not encouragement, that's a command. I'm coming back and I'm saying that is encouragement. Jesus looks at this church and he says, I see people who are so committed to me, I just want to encourage them, keep doing it. And he would have never said, be faithful unto death unless he believed they could do it. He believes in them. He says, I know you can do this. I know that in the midst of all the pressure they're putting on you, you're going to stand there and say, you know what, I'm a Christian. And here's what Polycarp did. You know what Polycarp did? When they went to put him at the stake to burn him, you know what you got to do to get someone burned at a stake? Right? You got to tie him there. Polycarp said, listen, the God that will give me grace to be burned by the fire will give me grace to stand there on my own. You don't need to tie me to the stake. And Polycarp stood at the stake, they lit the fire, and he was burned to death without any binds on him, anything binding him there. He was faithful unto death. He said, I will never give up on serving my Savior. I have served him 86 years. He has never done me anything wrong. I serve him even in death. Then I want you to notice his encouragement with his admiration. And there is admiration from the Lord here. So where's the admiration? He gives them a crown. Jesus, in his plan for us when we get to heaven, is going to reward us for things we have done. And there are going to be crowns that you can get for how you live. There's going to be crowns for winning people to the Lord. He says, you know what? I'm going to have a special crown, a crown of life, that I'm going to give to those who go through intense persecution, to those who die. It's going to be called the martyr's crown. And folks, when we talk about being in heaven, it comes to a point where it says he wipes away all tears. When we get to heaven, I think we'll still be crying. There'll come a point when he'll wipe away all tears. I just tried to envision this picture in my mind. We're standing there, the multitude of all the believers, and now the martyrs come up with their crowns. And you tell me there's going to be a wet eye in heaven when you start seeing every martyr through the centuries receive that crown. You and I know I'm not worthy of standing in their presence for what little I have had to endure, but I'm going to see that, and the applause, the tears, because these are receiving a special admiration from the Lord Jesus. You were willing to die for me. And he's going to reward them. And then I want you to see, lastly, he encourages them with his protection. His protection. How does that play out, his protection? He wraps up by saying, to him who overcomes. Now, to him who overcomes, the overcomer is always a Christian. 1 John chapter 5 speaks of the overcomer being the one who's a Christian. So it's not someone who just figured it out and was able to do more than others. No, if you're a Christian, you're an overcomer. If the one who's a Christian will not be hurt by the second death. The second death. We're going to kill you. Yeah? You're threatening me with eternity. We're going to have your soul burn in hell. No. You have no authority over my soul. My soul belongs to Jesus Christ. You have no chance of ever putting me in hell. Second death is going to hell. That's what second death is. Hell. It's never going to happen for us. That's why I don't believe in purgatory. And I know for sure there's absolutely no chance whatsoever, since I put my trust in Lord Jesus Christ, that I can ever go to hell. He says, I will not allow you to be burnt by the second death. You may die physically because of Christ, but you will never die spiritually. You will never die spiritually. There's no way, no one will ever take your soul from you. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to protect you. Encouragement? Absolutely. They can kill the body, they can't kill the soul. And this morning, I remind you, John 15:20. He's wrapping up his ministry on earth, last hours, and he says, remember the word that I said, you, the servant's not greater than his master? If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. I can't believe we're being persecuted. What do you mean you can't believe we're being persecuted? I can't believe Christians are being persecuted. He told us it was going to happen. It's part of the Christian journey. The world will hate us. Some of us will be called to give our lives. Some of us will lose jobs. Some of us will lose income. But it's part of our lives. Because the world hates a genuine Christian. We don't go out wanting people to hate us. It's just the way it's going to be. This morning, we're not facing it. A few religious liberties being lost here and there. So the question that I wrap up with this morning is, what do we do for those who are facing persecution? Because the world is in a mess right now. I get an email once a week. It's called Barnabas Aid. And he gives me a list of about 10 things that just happened this past week to Christians all around the world. Pastors that got thrown in jail. Christians that have lost their homes all around the world. Whether it's in Indonesia, whether it's in China, whether it's in Iran. Be informed. Quit living in this lap of luxury without the thought that other Christian brothers and sisters are not facing some of the worst persecution the church has ever known. Pray. We should be praying for brothers and sisters around the world and give. In the diplomatic world right now, what are we going to do with the Syrian refugees? Well, first off, I'll give you my 2 cents. Get them back home. Get in there and clean the mess up so they can go back home. They shouldn't have to be leaving their homes. But that may not happen. So what we'll do? Well, we can't have them come over here. Is that the Christian answer? We can't have them come over here? Christian brothers and sisters? These are Christians, folks. Most of them are Christians being run out of their homes. Vernon Brewer, put on the notes there, World Health, 15 years ago said there's a Syrian crisis. The Christians in Syria are being persecuted like none other. And now they're being driven out of their home, out of their country, out of their continent. What are we going to do? It's their problem, not ours. Maybe that's the United States position. It can't be a Christian's position. We have to figure out ways to help fellow Christians who are going through intense persecution. I'm not telling you what you must do. I'm just challenging you this morning. The Church of Smyrna is very much alive in 2015. And we as fellow believers should not be apathetic. But how can we help? How can we support? Because we do live in the lap of freedom. And persecution does come to this country. I hope you've got some good notes now in Revelation chapter 2, 8 through 11. Because you have a Savior who is walking in the mist, who knows exactly what you're facing. And here's his final call. Be faithful unto death. Be faithful unto death. How's your commitment to the Lord today? Maybe like my commitment to the Buckeyes. Half-hearted. I like them, but I'm not sold out. Some of you wouldn't dare. And I'm not saying this being an illustration. Some of you would never give up on the Buckeyes. That's got to be the level 10 times greater for a love for the Lord. I'll never give up on him. Faithful unto death, no matter what the cost. Father, I pray this morning you raise our level of commitment to that of the Church of Smyrna. May you look at us and not see anything to be concerned about, but only look to encourage us to keep running strong. In this sacred moment right now, challenge us to not be playing games at the foot of the cross, but to truly use the privileges and freedoms we have in this country to make the biggest difference for you. And be concerned about our brothers and sisters around the world. pray this in Christ's name.